The call that came into the Nederland, Colorado Police Department on March 2, 1994, was not about a crime. Not in the usual sense. It was about an eviction. A man named Trygve Bauge was being deported back to Norway for an expired visa, and his mother, Aud, was being forced out of their small, unfinished home on a windswept mountain. But as she was packing her belongings, a chilling detail surfaced. A detail she revealed to a local reporter, who then tipped off the police. She was worried about the shed. Specifically, she was worried about what, or who, was inside it. The police arrived at the property, a modest, ramshackle building set against the stark beauty of the Rockies. The air was thin and cold. Inside the dilapidated shed, they found a large, insulated box, humming faintly with the sound of a generator. It was sealed tight. When they finally managed to pry it open, the officers were met with a blast of impossibly cold air. And there, lying on a bed of dry ice, perfectly preserved, was the body of a man. He was frozen solid. This wasn't a murder victim. He hadn't been hidden in a panic. He was there by design. The man in the box was Trygve Bauge. He had died 5 years earlier, in 1989, thousands of miles away in his native Norway. And the story of how he ended up frozen in a Colorado shed would unravel a bizarre and deeply human saga of grief, radical science, and a family's desperate refusal to say goodbye. This wasn't just a body. It was a promise that one day death itself would be defeated. But to keep that promise, his family would have to fight their town, the law, and the very definition of what it means to be alive. What the police had just uncovered was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a strange and enduring mystery. How far would you go to save someone you love? And what happens when your solution becomes a town's darkest secret? To understand the man in the shed, you have to understand the man who put him there. His grandson, Trygve Bauge. Trygve was an idealist, a fervent believer in fringe ideas and anti-authoritarian principles. He was particularly captivated by the nascent field of cryonics, the practice of preserving a legally deceased person at extremely low temperatures with the hope that future medical technology could one day revive them. For Trygve, this wasn't science fiction. It was the next logical step in human evolution. His grandfather, Trygve Bauge, was a respected parks director in Norway. He lived a conventional life and, by all accounts, wasn't a cryonics enthusiast himself. But in 1989, at the age of 89, Bauge's heart gave out. For most families, this is where the story ends. For Trygve, it was where his mission began. Within hours of his grandfather's death, Trygve and his mother Aud sprang into action. They packed Bauge's body in ice and flew him from Norway to the Trans-Time Cryonics facility in Oakland, California. There, Bauge underwent a process called cryoprotection. His blood was replaced with a glycerol-based solution, a kind of biological antifreeze to prevent ice crystals from destroying his cells. His body was then gradually cooled and placed in a liquid nitrogen tank, awaiting a future resurrection. He became, in the language of cryonics, not a dead man, but a suspended person. For a while the plan worked. Bauge rested peacefully in his liquid nitrogen slumber. But Trygve, ever the idealist, dreamed of building his own state-of-the-art cryonics facility. He moved his mother and his grandfather's frozen body from California to the small, quirky mountain town of Nederland, Colorado. The year was 1993. He bought a plot of land and began constructing their new home, a custom-built cryogenic shed for Grandpa Bauge. But Trygve was not a builder, and his anti-establishment views meant he clashed with building codes and local ordinances. The project stalled. Money ran out, and then his visa expired. The US government ordered him deported. As Trygve was forced to leave the country, his mother Aud was left to care for the frozen man in the shed. This wasn't a high-tech facility. It was a shack, packed with 1,600 pounds of dry ice that had to be replenished every month. Aud was alone, in an unfinished house, with a secret that was getting harder and harder to keep. The town had no idea a dead man was being kept on ice just up the hill. But what happens when the one person holding it all together is about to break? Aud was now trapped, with her son deported and facing eviction from her unfinished home. The weight of their secret fell entirely on her shoulders. The monthly delivery of dry ice, the hum of the generator, the constant fear of discovery. It was an unsustainable burden. Her desperate comments to a local reporter were not a confession, but a cry for help. And it worked. The town of Nederland, population 1,500, suddenly woke up to a reality far stranger than any fiction. The discovery of Grandpa Bauge sent a shockwave through the community. This wasn't a place accustomed to scandal. It was a haven for artists, hippies, and individualists, people who generally subscribed to a live and let live philosophy. But keeping a frozen corpse in a shed? That tested the limits of even Netherlands' tolerance. The media descended on the small town. Headlines dubbed Bredo the frozen dead guy. The story was a morbid curiosity, a perfect slice of Americana Gothic. But for the town council of Nederland, it was a legal and ethical nightmare. The immediate question was, is this even illegal? They scoured the municipal code. There were ordinances against open fires, against stray dogs, against junk in your yard, but there was absolutely nothing on the books about storing a cryogenically frozen human body in a residential shed. You couldn't make it up. In a moment of dry bureaucratic humor, the town clerk famously declared, "He's not a resident. He doesn't vote. He's not a property owner. He's just here." The situation created a schism. Some residents were outraged, viewing it as a grotesque and unsanitary biohazard. Others were more sympathetic. They saw a family grappling with profound grief, clinging to a radical hope. The emotional core of the story began to emerge. This wasn't about a monster or a criminal. It was about a family's love, stretched to its most extreme and unusual conclusion. Trygve, communicating from Norway, argued passionately that his grandfather was not dead, merely suspended. He believed he was protecting his grandfather's future life. The town council, facing immense pressure, hastily passed a new ordinance, Section 734, making it illegal to store a whole or partial human or animal body on any property. But then came the twist. In a nod to the strange circumstances, they added a grandfather clause. Bredo Morstel, and only Bredo Morstel, was exempt. He could stay, but there was a condition. The body had to be maintained. Someone had to ensure Grandpa never thawed out. The town had inadvertently made itself the guardian of a frozen dead man. But who would take on the job? With Trygve in Norway and Odd gone from the house, the fate of Grandpa Bredo fell to the community itself. And this is where the story turns from a dark mystery into something else, something uniquely human. Nederland had a choice: evict the frozen man or embrace the absurdity. They chose to embrace it. A local environmental company volunteered to take over the monthly dry ice runs. A man named Bo Schaffer, who called himself the Iceman, was hired to make the deliveries. For years, he would haul the 1,600 pounds of dry ice up the mountain, pack it around Bredo's sarcophagus, and ensure the temperature remained a steady 60 degrees Fahrenheit. He became the official caretaker of the town's most famous and most silent resident. The story tapped into a deep vein of human emotion. They had adopted this frozen stranger. They felt a responsibility. Reporters would interview Bo, who spoke of his duty with a strange, solemn reverence. He was keeping a man's dream alive, even if it was a dream most people couldn't comprehend. The story was a testament to the power of human connection, even to someone who could no longer connect back. But why did this particular story resonate so deeply? Perhaps because it touches on a universal fear: the finality of death. Cryonics, for all its scientific controversy, is born from the most basic human desire, the desire for more time. Trygve Bauge wasn't a mad scientist in the classic sense. He was a grandson who couldn't let go. He saw a future where his grandfather could wake up, see the mountains again, and meet his descendants. It's a powerful, almost childlike hope. A hope that says the end doesn't have to be the end. This emotional core is what prevented the story from being just a joke. It was a tragedy, a comedy, and a philosophical debate all packed in dry ice. Then in 2002, the town decided to take their stewardship one step further. They launched the first annual Frozen Dead Guy Days. What started as a small, solemn acknowledgement of their strange resident morphed into one of the most bizarre and beloved festivals in the country. Frozen Dead Guy Days became the official aftermath, the living legacy of Bredo Morstel's suspended animation. The festival is a surreal carnival of the macabre. It includes coffin races, where teams sprint through an obstacle course carrying a corpse in a casket. There are polar plunges, frozen t-shirt contests, and tours to see the shed where Grandpa Bredo still resides. It's a celebration that perfectly mirrors the story itself, a blend of dark humor, genuine respect, and utter absurdity. For over 2 decades, the festival brought thousands of tourists to Nederland, injecting life into the town's economy, all thanks to a dead man. The town's identity became inextricably linked with its frozen resident. Bo, the Iceman Schaffer, became a local celebrity, leading tours and telling the story to captivated audiences. The dark, hidden secret was now the town's biggest tourist attraction. But the story took another turn in recent years. After nearly 30 years as the official caretaker, Bo Schaffer's contract ended. The festival itself, after growing so large, moved from Nederland to the nearby city of Estes Park in 2023. And most critically, Trygve Bauge, still in Norway, announced that his grandfather would finally be moved from the shed to a more permanent, professional facility. The era of the frozen dead guy in the Netherlands shed, the very thing that defined the town for a generation, was coming to an end. The final mystery is no longer about who is in the shed, but about what it all meant. Did the town's strange celebration honor the family's wish, or did it mock it? Was it a beautiful act of community empathy, or just a clever marketing ploy? The answer is probably both. The story of Bredo Morstel forced an entire community to confront questions about life, death, and the strange, uncharted territory in between. It became a living piece of folklore, a story told around campfires and screamed from the sidelines of a coffin race. The legacy of Bredo Morstel is a paradox. He is a symbol of death's chilling permanence, yet also a symbol of a stubborn, undying hope. His grandson, Trygve, never wavered in his belief. He spent his life and his savings dedicated to a future he will likely never see. Was it a fool's errand, or an act of profound, unconditional love? Perhaps the line between the two is thinner than we think. The shed in Nederland now sits empty. Grandpa Bredo has been moved on. The festival bears his name, but has left his home. Yet the story lingers in the cold mountain air. It reminds us that underneath the surface of our quiet little towns, behind the closed doors of ordinary-looking houses, lie the most extraordinary human dramas. Stories of grief so powerful they defy reason, and hope so vast they aim to conquer mortality itself. The final question is one we are all left with. In the dead of night, when we consider our own mortality, what is the difference between a corpse and a patient? For the town of Nederland, the answer was a man named Bredo, a man who, for 3 decades, was both. He was a grandfather, a mystery, a landmark, and a promise, all while resting silently on a bed of ice. If you find these explorations into the strange and forgotten corners of human history compelling, consider subscribing and joining our community. We have many more stories to unearth. Let us know in the comments what you think. Was Trygve Bauge a visionary, or was this whole saga a tragic mistake?